Barnaby Bumble was not like the other bees. While his friends played and laughed, he was busy with his jars of pollen, carefully sorting and studying each tiny grain. To Barnaby, pollen wasn't just dust, it was a treasure waiting to be understood. Barnaby Bumble was a very serious bee. While all the other young bees buzzed happily from flower to flower, collecting pollen and giggling, Barnaby was meticulously organising his pollen. He had little labelled jars, daffodil dust, tulip treasures, hyacinth hues. He even had a tiny magnifying glass to inspect the pollen grains. "Barnaby," buzzed Beatrice Bee, her wings shimmering with golden pollen. "Come play flower frisbee with us." Barnaby adjusted his tiny spectacles. "I'm cataloguing the micro-variations in the pollen of the crimson clover," he said importantly. "It's vital research." Beatrice and the other bees exchanged amused glances. Then, with a happy buzz, they zoomed off to play. Barnaby felt a small pang of loneliness, but he reminded himself that science was more important than silly games. One day, a terrible storm swept through the meadow. The wind howled, the rain poured, and flowers were tossed about like tiny boats on a stormy sea. The young bees huddled together, shivering in fear. When the storm finally passed, the meadow was a mess. Flowers were broken, pollen was scattered, and the bees were very worried. "How will we make honey now?" cried a little bee named Penelope. That's when Barnaby stepped forward. He might not have been the best at flower frisbee, but he was the best at pollen. He carefully examined the scattered pollen, using his magnifying glass and detailed notes. "Don't worry," he said. "I know which flowers were where and what kind of pollen they had. I can help." Barnaby guided the bees to the remaining flowers and helped them collect the right pollen. He even taught them how to tell different types of pollen apart, so they could be pollen experts too. The bees were amazed. They had never realised how important Barnaby's boring work was. They thanked him again and again. Then Beatrice smiled and said, "Barnaby, we made a new game just for you, pollen frisbee. We name the pollen type while we play." Barnaby was surprised, but he decided to give it a try. To his delight, he had so much fun. From that day on, Barnaby was still a serious bee, but he wasn't lonely anymore. He learned that his unique talents were valuable and that even a very serious bee could have fun. And most importantly, he discovered that sometimes the best adventures happen when you're not afraid to be different